Okay, thanks for joining us, Irina.
Thank you so much for having me.
Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and your research?
Yeah, sure. I finished last year my PhD. It's in artificial intelligence for society. So it's a very interdisciplinary PhD program that brings together lawyers, computer scientists, psychologists, economists. So that really shaped my view on artificial intelligence because prior to that, uh, I went to law school and then I finished my legal traineeship. I worked in a law firm for almost 2 years, but I didn't quite enjoy that life. So I felt like I could do more. I wanted to study more what was going on in society. So I applied for this PhD program, where basically I studied AI applied to the legal profession and especially judicial decision-making processes, but also the regulation of AI. So that was a very important part of my studies. And being in this interdisciplinary program, I had also to study, for instance, human-computer interaction and some aspects that are not very talked about in this field of, regulation of AI or AI applied to law. So yeah, that was a very interesting experience, and now I'm continuing as a postdoc, and I also do some compliance services for startups adopting AI systems in their processes.
And one of the topics you have researched, which I'm really interested in, is how courts delegate judicial powers to AI systems. Also, more broadly about cognitive automation. Could you very briefly explain to us what your views are on it, just generally?
Yeah, so thank you for the question because you put together two very important points. So, first is the delegation of judicial decision-making power, and the second one is cognitive automation, right? So there are like two different concepts, and they merge together when we talk about high-stakes decision-making processes. So, probably starting with the cognitive automation side. That was probably the most interesting part of my research because what I have realized is that AI is a tool for automating certain tasks. So before that, we had, for instance, robotics in industry, in production, in manufacturing that automated certain manual tasks. But with this software AI-based systems, we're automating cognitive tasks. So we automate certain parts of our reasoning. And this is the most important part to understand because it's not like we cannot delegate certain mental or cognitive processes, but we have to do it in such a way that we still keep meaningful human control, right? So let's delve a little bit deeper into this aspect. For instance, there have been some very interesting papers recently on how cognitive automation shapes our decision-making processes. For instance, one recent paper talked about the difference between cognitive surrender and cognitive offloading. And that is such a big difference because when we make a decision, for instance, we think about the elements to reach the decision, but we can, offload the most, let's say, burdensome components of it. But if we surrender completely to the decision-making process made by an AI system, that means that we are not in charge. We are not the ones that actually made the specific decision, right? So the big difference is in expertise. In my opinion, this is what I have realized through my studies. I studied cognitive automation, applying the same principles of automation from the 90s that were made, for instance, in the cockpits for pilots, so you could automate certain processes. But then when there's a critical situation, you need the human pilot to be able to intervene. So this way, in the 90s, they started to develop this human-computer interaction frameworks, accounting for human factors in these forms of automation. So for instance, you need to put certain safeguards, right? So we will probably get back to this, but let's move to how this would be applicable to judicial decision-making processes. So one of the elements that emerged from the human factors research from the 90s that you need to include cognitive forcing functions so that you have the human decision maker still responsible in the specific decision. So when we bring this to judges, When first, ChatGPT came and large language models, generative AI, there was a huge hype because the results were so convincing that everyone thought, okay, it's just so easy, just ask ChatGPT, right? But there is a big difference. Yeah, you could automate certain cognitive tasks, but at the same time, you need to remain fully in control. And with judges, this is particularly compelling because, well, we cannot really delegate the judicial decision-making power because it's constitutional matter. So we have certain rules in place that say that judges must be responsible for the decision-making process because they play a very important role in society. So we have the division of power, and I'm going to speak from basically a European Union perspective. So we have a fundamental right to an effective judicial remedy. What that means is that we need to have a meaningful judicial decision to protect any right when we go to court, right? So we as a society, we view judges as playing this very important role. And if we admit, even for 1 second, that judges can automate certain cognitive tasks or they can delegate certain decision-making power to AI systems, that is kind of constitutionally uneasy to admit, right? So we have certain safeguards put in place to prevent that. For instance, we have, once again, the fundamental right to an effective judicial remedy. And from the regulatory perspective, we have the human oversight requirement for this kind of AI systems implemented for the administration of justice. We also have the right to an explanation from the affected individual. But all of this relates to law. But remember, we talked about cognitive automation from the human-computer interaction and human factors research. So we kind of like need to bridge this gap. How do we admit that we can put AI systems effectively in a judicial decision-making process? So I realize that I have introduced a lot of elements, so maybe you can ask me more specific questions and we can delve deeper into each aspect.
So what I would like to do is to read a quote from you, just to provide a counterpoint to your views. So this is from an article called "AI Will Kill All Lawyers," and it was published in the British magazine The Spectator in December 2025. So this is from an interview with a senior barrister who is anonymous. Last week we did an experiment, a kind of simulation. We took a real, recent and important case, a complex civil court appeal, which I wrote, and it took me a day and a half. We redacted all identifying details for anonymity and confidentiality, and we fed the same case to grok-heavy AI. And then we asked it to do what I did. After some prompting, the end result was, he shakes his head, spectacular, actually staggering. I did it in 30 seconds, and it was much better than mine. And remember, I'm very good at this. The best possible legal document, and all done in a second for pennies. How can any of us compete? We can't. So the point this
Yeah.
lawyer is making here is that AI can actually make judicial work much, much, much faster, and also, according to him, of much higher quality. Aren't we as a society kind of responsible to implement AI tools in the court system if it can make these processes more efficient and better?
So thank you because it brings a lot into the discussion. First of all, like my first reaction was like, I'm glad I left the legal profession because in this crazy times, yeah, AI will kill all the lawyers, but at the same time, I'm pretty optimistic. So I'm going to explain why. So first of all, we have a very experienced lawyer, right? So the lawyer knew exactly what he was doing. And when I read headlines like ChatGPT did this, or in this case it was Grok did this, it did better than a lawyer. Well, LLMs don't do anything on their own, right? So you need an experienced lawyer who prompts the system, and then the most important part, in order to say that the system did correctly one thing, you need the human expertise to evaluate it. So now you see it's not a competition between the lawyer and the AI system. It's a collaboration between the two. So we cannot compete because, in my opinion, it's not a matter of competition. I think the whole narrative of AI replacing people is kind of flawed because AI on its own doesn't do anything. It doesn't have agency. Maybe now with agentic AI, it's a little bit different, but I'm not talking about that specifically. So then again, we have the lawyer that delegated a task to the AI system and then had the expertise to review it. Without these two moments of human-computer interaction, the prompting and then the evaluation of the result, the AI system does not do anything, and the result is not per se valuable. So we get this value from the system when we include this collaborative dimension. And yes, given the fact that these systems become more and more capable, I would say we are responsible to include them in our legal profession, even in judicial decision-making processes. But again, we have to do that responsibly. So in order to do that, I'm going to make a distinction between AI systems for lawyers and those for judges, because the risk dimension is completely different, right? So as I said earlier, I also studied the regulation of AI, and in EU we have, like, since 2 years we have approved the AI Act, and there are like specific risk tiers, right? So AI systems for the administration of justice is considered as high risk, so we have higher safeguards, whereas AI systems for the legal profession are considered lower risk, so there are less restrictions, less safeguards to be put in place. And this is why we need to consider that the same technology used in different scenarios would determine different risks. And that is relevant because when we talk about, for instance, general purpose AI systems, just say ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, they can do a wide variety of tasks. But if we tailor them to a specific scenario, like judges or lawyers, they can perform better and we can control them better because we develop them for that specific purpose. So as I talked earlier, it's related to the risk level. For the judicial AI, we have higher safeguards. We have the requirement for human oversight. That means that the AI system will have to be developed in such a way that the human overseeing the system has to exert meaningful human control. That means that the whole system would have to be tested against hallucinations. The interface would have to be developed in such a way that we prevent the cognitive surrender that we talked about earlier. So that means that we would probably need to go beyond the ChatGPT kind of interface, where a judge could type everything or anything and then would reach just a decision. We can tailor it for specific purposes. We can use retrieval augmented generation on previous cases. We need to introduce, for instance, databases on laws, previous case law, guidelines that would ground the result in more reliable outputs, and also have the interface in such a way that maybe the judge first makes the decision and then use AI maybe to justify it, maybe to write, to make it more accessible to the affected individual. Or we can limit the AI system to perform certain ancillary tasks, preparatory tasks, something which does not entail the precise judicial decision making that would still require the judge to be the main decision maker. We can tailor it in so many different things. And probably what we need to do is just take off our glasses of this ChatGPT interface and look at how many different ways we can leverage LLMs in different designs of the systems. We have seen, so the second tier is AI systems for lawyers. Now the market is a lot faster. And since the risk tier is lower for lawyers, we have already these instruments available on the market. We have great co-pilots that aid lawyers in performing research, for instance, drafting documents, contract drafting, triaging NDAs and stuff like this. We have already seen how powerful these tools are. And I would say that given the situation of the legal profession, so I'm talking from an Italian perspective, there are so many lawyers in Italy. Um, some of them are very eager to adopt these tools because they view them as a competitive advantage, whereas others are a bit, less prone because it takes also a lot of work to get into a level where you know how to use them responsibly so we can avoid hallucinations and stuff like that. So to conclude on this question, I don't think AI will kill all lawyers. Definitely not. It will definitely change the legal profession, but it will change it slowly over time once we move from general purpose AI to more specific AI for both judges and lawyers. And again, it's not a competition, it's a collaboration between the human and the AI system.
One of the points you made was that AI is less risky for lawyers compared to judges, which I think makes a lot of sense because a judge has, when a judge makes a ruling, it will have consequences. Um, Whereas for lawyers, the stakes are a bit lower. One thing I'm really concerned about generally, and goes beyond law, is all of the AI slop and low quality AI writing. And that has been a problem for legal tech AI tools as well. We see it with these AI hallucinations in court cases. Do you see that as a temporary problem, or is it something that we'll have to adapt to, or how do you see it?
Probably we need to consider the time frame. So now we see all these cases of hallucinations. There is a very famous AI hallucination database curated by a researcher, Damien Charlatan. I think it's pretty famous in the legal profession because like once a week I just look at the database, and then like every week it's like 100 more cases, and it keeps increasing.
Wow.
So yeah, it's really since now we're like more than.
Globally?
Yes, globally. So the database is created very well. So I do recommend having a look at it. And you can also filter for state and continent and see also how judges decided on this hallucinated, usually they're case law citations. Um, is it a temporary problem? I hope yes. And optimistically, I think so. Because at the beginning, if you remember how ChatGPT was marketed, um, you didn't have many instructions, right? You just had one landing page, and then they said, okay, this is what you can do with ChatGPT. These are the limitations. And one of the limitations was it has limited knowledge of events after a certain date. But the way it was phrased almost meant that it has infinite knowledge before specific date. It was 2022, if I'm not mistaken. So lawyers who knew that it has huge capabilities for the legal profession started interrogating ChatGPT almost as an oracle. And it took us some time to realize that hallucinations are an intrinsic limitation of generative large language models, that you should not trust them. You should not just plainly ask questions. Maybe it's better if you just give it instructions instead of treating it as an oracle that gives you information on the state of the world. But that took some time, right? So what I envisage is that there's probably going to be, now we're reaching the tipping point of the number of hallucinated case law in legal briefs, probably with the passage of time, with more AI literacy and more knowledge and information on the limitations of these systems. And then again, moving slowly away from general purpose AI into more specific AI systems for the legal profession, we will go down and reach a plateau at some point. This is what I view. So I couldn't stress enough how important AI literacy is. So I did probably more than 20 courses for bar associations, training lawyers on how to use these tools, both general purpose and more specific for the legal profession. And one thing that really kind of like, stresses me is when they say, I asked ChatGPT and this is what it replied, and it's completely unreliable. Of course it is. Like the fact that still in 2026, I hear people say, I asked ChatGPT is very worrisome in my opinion. But at the same time, I see a positive trend of people becoming more aware of the limitations of the system. So I hope it will decrease with time.
Are law firms required to adopt AI to stay competitive in the future?
Probably yes. I mean, it's actually a revolutionary technology for the legal profession. I would gladly go back to lawyering now that I have AI systems because I completed my legal traineeship where when these tools were not available. So I remember the frustration of having, to go through, different previous contracts to see how to draft my first contract. Same for legal briefs. It took me a lot of time just to learn how to do it. Sometimes lawyers do not have enough time to train the trainees. Now that we have an AI systems that can help, you need to avoid the Dunning-Kruger effect. So if you don't know enough, just do not assume that with an AI system you will become competent. But the learning curve, I think, becomes a little bit like faster. So you can, if you know how to use the AI system and if you have the appropriate legal background and you're a reasonable person and you do engage in actual intellectual and cognitive work, I think these tools are going to give a huge help, especially for trainees still learning. But also for senior lawyers, I think that the paradox is that senior lawyers, especially in very high performing law firms, have already adopted this tools. So there is a huge risk of some other lawyers maybe slower at adopting these innovative tools will slowly become out of the competition, let's say. But also what we have seen after the pandemic, especially in Italy, there was a steep decline in law graduates, wanting to become lawyers. And I think these tools are going to give the most motivated people a reason to actually do the work. And it will inevitably get rid of all those that are not, either, I wouldn't say capable, but maybe it's not the right inclination for them. I'm not saying that it's compulsory. Like you could still perfectly do your job without using these tools. I'm not pushing for them, definitely not. As long as you have very good workflow, you know how to do your job, and you have, of course, time and patience to train your trainees, because at some point you will need some more people to carry out your work. But yeah.
Another concern of mine, law firms could replace junior lawyers for many, many tasks with AI systems. Why shouldn't they do it?
I mean, economically, it makes a lot of sense, right? A trainee, I mean, initially they're not really paid most of the times unless you go to like top international law firms. So I think it makes a lot of sense also for a trainee not to accept to do a legal traineeship for 2 years without being paid. So economically, it makes a lot of sense also for senior lawyers not to hire trainees if with like 20 dollars monthly subscription to whatever tool you can get the same work done. But that's also precisely the point. I mean, these systems can do probably just a limited amount of work that they would probably previously delegate to a junior or a trainee, and they would have to supervise it. But the work is precisely the same. So it's not like it will replace it because it does a better job. It doesn't. It automates certain cognitive tasks. It does not perform any task that a trainee could do. But economically, it makes a lot of sense. But then we have to rethink, like, what's the role of the legal profession? Like, what's the role of the senior lawyers if they're not training the juniors? But at some point, there's going to be a generational shift. So I don't know how this is going to unfold. I don't think like all the trainees are going to disappear one day to another. I mean, the legal profession has still a huge social role, so I don't think they're going to disappear. Maybe less, but better lawyers is not that bad after all.
Okay, last question before I let you go.
Yeah.
Do you think regulation is hindering innovation in the EU?
Wonderful question. I love it. No, I don't think so. Then we have to look at what kind of innovation we're pushing for. right? So if you look at the definition of innovation, it would be to solve in new ways with new technology, previous problems, but it also has to bring some value. So it's not innovation for its own sake. It has to be innovation for a purpose. And the purpose is to bring some more societal value. And we need to ask ourselves, what is this value? The fact that it can automate certain tasks and you could do them in less time, it's not a value per se. Just save time does not automatically mean that we will all work less. There are actually studies that show the opposite. What kind of value? If it's just to, again, economically, to spend less and increase profit, that's not necessarily the kind of innovation that we're looking for. Whereas in the European Union, what I see is we have put a lot of emphasis on the protection of fundamental rights, and that stands as a core value, like human-centric AI and trustworthy AI. And if innovation does not bring value into those, perspective, protecting those rights, then it's not a kind of innovation that we want. So what I feel is like we do not really need less regulation, but we need better legal scholarship to help transition through the compliance process. That's a completely different problem, but it's not like getting rid of regulation that we will push innovation. Yes, we want a specific kind of innovation, and regulation is put in place to achieve precisely that. So I hope this answers the question.
It does. Thank you very much for sharing your insights today, Irina. It was
Yeah.
great.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.